We all need a sense of direction, especially if you're like me and distinguishing east from west is like cracking an ancient code. Since finding my way in the real world often seems like a lost cause, I'll have to stick to photography. And in photography, we have this fantastic element of composition that even the most lost among the lost will find their way: line. And lines not only lead us to a specific point, but they also create depth, movement, and bring emotion and meaning into our images. So welcome to the world of lines. Lines are one of the most powerful elements of composition. Every element brings something to the table, but lines have an undeniable pull. We're always drawn to follow a line, and also you'll come to see that they are everywhere. We just need to learn to see them and how to use them. Let's begin with leading lines, which they lead. They lead us to the most important parts of the frame or to our subject, but they can also take us on an exploration through several parts of the image. Take this shot of the metro in Madrid. These escalators are lines that lead us towards our main subject. Also notice how these lights up here also play their part, directing our eyes to the same subject once again. These escalators not only act as lines, but also as a frame, which is another element of composition we will cover soon. Next up, the majestic dunes of Maspalomas in Gran Canaria, a quite unique landscape. This image is a good example of how lines can help us navigate across the frame, leading us from one subject to the next, from left to right, or right to left, depending on whatever part of the world you're from, I guess. And then there's the beach, a good place to be. But notice the lines created by a police truck on the sand. These lines guide us deeper into the frame towards a man having a pleasant morning with his dog. But an interesting thing happens here, at least to me. Even though there's nothing going on in this section here, I keep following these lines past our subject, into the distance, and I'm curious to see what's ahead. But lines are not just about leading us towards a subject. Sometimes they just play an important part in the composition, simply adding movement, like in this example here. There's a difference between horizontal and vertical lines, curved lines, and diagonal lines. Curved lines are relaxed, calm, and give a sense of fluidity. Horizontal and vertical lines tend to create stability, while diagonal lines introduce tension. A very common technique used in film is the Dutch angle, which is achieved by tilting the camera and creating diagonal lines that disrupt the horizon. This technique is used when something is off, when a character is confused or in danger. It creates a sense of uncertainty, instability, and madness. Let's take a moment to see this image here I took in Retiro Park. The straight lines formed by these three columns communicate a sense of stability. The subject's upright posture also mirrors these columns and adds to this sense of groundedness. If you plan to visit Portugal, make sure to make a stop at Aveiro and take some time to visit Costa Nova and walk through these charming houses. What I find interesting in this image is the sense of cleanness or structure created by the vertical lines of the houses. Everything is straight and where it's supposed to be, respecting those vertical and horizontal lines. There's order. But in this other image, I tilted my camera and created diagonal lines. Everything is off, and that sense of order suddenly vanishes. I want to talk briefly about the topic of lens choice without getting lost, because getting lost is kind of my specialty. Wide-angle lenses amplify the sense of space and depth in an image and introduce distortion, which changes or alters the proportions and shapes of objects. Maybe like bending reality. This makes wide-angle lenses quite fun when we play around with lines, because they turn an ordinary scene into something more vivid, like adding jalapenos to a grilled cheese sandwich. This photograph was taken on a 24mm lens, and notice how the boardwalk seems to stretch endlessly towards the horizon. It's a good example of converging lines, which help create depth. Converging lines are parallel lines that, if they keep going into the distance, they would meet at the exact same spot or vanishing point. Here we can also see that wide-angle effect in action. This image was taken on an iPhone's wide-angle lens, which equates to a 13mm, I believe. Here, the sense of depth becomes even more noticeable, and these lines become quite exaggerated, pulling us into the image. Don't feel like you need a wide-angle lens to work with line. Yes, maybe you'll end up eating your brains trying to create a dramatic perspective with a 50mm lens, but don't give up just yet, because we can certainly play with line with longer focal lengths. Welcome to Milan, where even pigeons walk like fashion models. This shot was taken on an 85mm lens. And look at how the tramway lines and these lines up here created by these bare trees lead towards a vanishing point. Longer focal lengths compress the scene. Everything appears to be tighter, larger, and closer to us. Had we shot this scene at 24mm, we would have created a lot of depth, but our main subjects would have been so small and far in the distance, they would have been lost. So where can we find lines? As I said at the beginning of this video, they are pretty much everywhere. Roads, stairs, buildings, or even the movement of a paintbrush in a window. This is a bit more abstract, but these brushstrokes form lines that lead our eyes towards this woman. By the way, lines don't need to be continuous. Our minds will connect the dots. The world of lines is very powerful and a great composition element to use. When you're out and about with your camera or a vanilla ice cream cone, try to notice the lines around you and maybe follow where they lead. You'll find that it's near impossible to get lost. See you next time.